Go ahead and start recording and kick things off because it looks like we've got a good number of attendees. So for all of you joining us this afternoon, thank you very much. Some of you, it looks like, have joined us on other panel discussions that we've had over the last 3 or 4 months. So appreciate your involvement. Expecting another interesting, enjoyable, hopefully knowledge-filled conversation this afternoon. So we'll get into some of the details in terms of what we're going to talk about today and what we're doing. I like to, since I'm the marketing guy, just remind everybody of just different ways to interact with PTP because we've got a lot going on and obviously want to be able to share that with you and keep you up to date. So every one of the webinar panel discussions, is, in addition to some of the other webinars that we've done, are on our website under the resources webinar archive page. So these will all be recorded. You can kind of skip to different parts if there's things that you missed. And for those people that registered that weren't able to attend, we've got some people that will reach out to you and remind you that this exists. So check out some of the other conversations that we've had. Check us out on LinkedIn as well. We've got a lot of communication that goes on, updates with our partners, events that we're posting like this one, and just a lot of commentary, blogs, things like that, a lot of content that we're putting out there, a lot of Q&A and important questions. The blog page is fairly consistent. And then also just to kind of let you know, we're partnering with AWS to do some Immersion Day Training. We actually did the first of 3 this morning. I see a couple people that are on this afternoon that joined us this morning. So thanks for the kind of the double duty with us. Today we talked about management tools in AWS, and then the next couple of weeks will be around control tower and then storage. So we've got some cool stuff coming on. And then just kind of hit us up on ptp.cloud, subscribe to what we've got going on. So want to introduce the team here. I'm going to call this the Chris and Mike participants because outside of me, your name is either Chris or Mike, is the way this one kind of worked out. So a little ironic. But I get to be the moderator in these events, which is kind of fun for me. One, because I get to be part of a lot of different enjoyable conversations. And 2, I get to ask smart people questions and then just sit back and listen. So, I get to be a little bit of a participant here. Part of what we do in these, for those that are new, is we make this this is for us kind of a happy hour panel discussion. So the thought is, hey, we're all sequestered and we're doing this virtually, but we miss the times when we've been able to go to a place together, have a beer, and just have some casual conversations. So part of what we'll do when we do these introductions is share what it is that we're drinking, whether it's alcoholic beverage or not, just to give kind of a sense of who we are. So I'm responsible for marketing and managed services at PTP. I'm actually based in Dallas, Texas, suburb of Dallas. Today, I am having what is called a Karbach Love Street. So Karbach is a brewery out of Houston. Dallas people don't typically like to promote Houston, but this Love Street is like the perfect, it's kind of a Kolsch, blonde Kolsch type mix. Perfect hot Texas summer afternoon kind of drink. So that'll be perfect for me, and I may actually still be able to get a couple things done after this. So with that, let's start with the Chris's, and then we'll go to the Mikes. So Chris Cabel, you want to introduce yourself and what you might be enjoying?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Gary. So hey, everyone, Chris Cabel, one of the sales directors here at Megaport. Been with Megaport for about 3 years now. I was initially a partner for 2 years prior, so I have a great deal of familiarity with the platform. I'm based on the East Coast, New Jersey specifically, so I've worked quite a bit with the PTP team, building out future-proof networking solutions for their clients' hybrid and multi-cloud needs. I do have a few more calls after today, so right now I'm just drinking sparkling water, but I didn't want to cheat everyone on the call. So I'm usually pretty big fan of like New England IPAs, but one thing I found kind of like the perfect light beer, easy to find, is the Dogfish Head Slightly Mighty IPA. Probably like the best tasting light beer I've had in a while. So they actually uses like hops with a good tropical flavor, and they actually use monk fruit extract in it as well. So real easy, perfect when you're kind of hanging out in New Jersey these days where it's 90 degrees plus, not too heavy, but just enough flavor.
I'll have to put that on the list. Awesome. That sounds good.
Okay.
All right, Chris, number 2, Mr. Dusio.
Yes, sir. So it's Chris Dusio. I'm the VP of Engineering at PTP. I've been working with most of the folks, except for the guys from Megaport, but being together with the rest of the guys for quite a long time now in different iterations. But we've had a few great years here, and we were lucky enough to partner up with Megaport to kind of have basically a solution that we can provide to customers that is easy to implement, scales up, works extremely well to help customers bridge that gap between multi-cloud architectures and hyperscales. And the folks that are on the call do a really good job of taking the mystery out of how to do that for folks that may not be as familiar with that as they might otherwise end up being. My choice of drink is my typical choice for 4 o'clock on a afternoon, which is basically vodka and Powerade. So
Awesome.
I am going to put that over there and barely touch that till we're done with this, so that I don't say anything stupid. But
Funny.
Important to stay hydrated.
some kind of beer, but my kids drank it all on me. So
Yeah. That's so great. All right. From the Chris's onto the mics. Let's start with Mr. Rockwell.
Yeah. I don't know if my drink's gonna quite beat that vodka Powerade combination, but we'll see how this goes. Mike Rockwell, I'm the head of solutions for Megaport in North America. So I've been in this role for roughly about 5 months, but I've been with Megaport going on almost 3 years. So I've always been on the solution architect side, ultimately supporting, sales from a technical perspective. And then, my longer term background has been more in the carrier space as a sales engineer for a while before that. So definitely on the older end of the spectrum, as I've found out more recently, but I think they say that's seasoned. I had the intention, so I'm in Denver, Colorado, so kind of one of the pioneering states, I think, of the craft beer revolution. But I'm going to let my state and my members down here. Meant to get to the store to get something a little bit more creative Colorado-wise, but I peeked in my fridge and had this very fancy Modelo.
Oh, nice.
So this is very refreshing, I think, on a nice summer day. And, I was afraid of the Corona, so I went with the Modelo. Bad jokes are my thing. But anyway, I appreciate the PTP team, including Chris and myself and the Megaport team on this call. I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
You bet. Yeah, glad you could join. Mike McElaney, who we like to call Mac, your turn.
Thanks for having hosting, Gary. Mike McElaney, one of the founding partners here at PTP. Been working with these guys, like Chris said, for a number of years. And today I'm drinking one of our go-to beers at PTP because we're so focused.
Cloud Candy.
We're doing the Cloud Candy. Cloud Candy is out of a brewery called Mighty Squirrel out of Waltham, Mass. This is traditional New England IPA. It's about 6.7 or something like that. So it can do some damage if you have more than 2 or 3, which I probably will, but we'll see. And not real excited to talk about Megaport. It's extremely important to what we do for our customers. So back to you, Gary.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, excited to kind of just jump in. So let's not let's move on to the real content. Let's get off any sort of slides and get into it. So one thing I can say definitively this afternoon is that we have got true experts with us on the phone today. So, between the Megaport team and their experience with the technology, and Mike McElaney and your background in networks, and Chris, I think that you've probably designed just about every type of network known to man. So if there are questions that anybody in the audience has that we don't ask today, shoot us something in the Q&A or the chat, and I'll be happy to take a look while these other guys are saying smart stuff. So feel free to engage with us. We'd love to talk with you about what we're doing. So I think just to get things started off, maybe we'll start a little higher level and then we can move down a little bit. But I'm gonna go Dusio and Mac for for the Chris and Mike on our side, and then I'll go Chris and Mike for the Megaport team. So this one's going to go to Chris from Megaport. But we talk a lot of this in the direct cloud connectivity and the value. I mean, there's obviously layers and layers of value, but some of it is associated with our customers choosing or being part of multiple clouds, whether that's SaaS providers or whether that's public cloud providers. So maybe just start us off a little bit in framing up the question of, hey, why are companies leveraging multiple clouds? And what does that really present in terms of challenges kind of leading into the why you might want direct cloud connectivity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as kind of cloud strategy has evolved for the modern enterprise, most users are going multi-cloud to benefit from unique capabilities for each vendor, kind of at a broad stroke. But some of the most common kind of sound bites that we get from our conversations are first and foremost diversification. So similar how people wanted to diversify their physical infrastructure or legacy infrastructure, they're looking to build out a same type of environment even within the cloud, right? Another huge component is going to be based off of availability, so really geography. What workloads are available as close to kind of the end users as possible. And that geography also can pull in some of the regulatory issues within certain industries around data sovereignty. And then really kind of at the end of the day, what I found more often than not is it just the internal teams and their comfort level or preference to work with some of the platforms or systems, whether that's kind of just organic growth within the organization itself, or potentially kind of acquiring infrastructure through merger and acquisition. So those are some of kind of the common themes that I've seen over the past few years, people kind of going to multi-cloud. But here at Megaport, we've definitely seen the number of our clients actually now leveraging 3 or more different service providers, more than double over the last fiscal year. So it's really shifted from just, okay, we have a hybrid infrastructure to now we have not only hybrid infrastructure, but multiple clouds that we're leveraging as well. And that does pose some challenges, right? So again, a lot of it's going to be internal resources. So having the kind of the manpower, right, to actually specialize in each one of the platforms and understand how to leverage those platforms as best as possible. And typically, when it comes down to the applications, they're only as good as the underlying network. So network can also pose a huge challenge because all of the as a service type resources that they're consuming are completely flexible. So a lot of times the people and the developers ramping up those resources are really putting pressure on network teams to actually scale their capacity in line with the resources themselves. So between that and then actually just building out this highly resilient global architecture, that's really kind of the main piece from a networking perspective that are some common pain points that we come across on a daily basis.
That's great. That makes a lot of sense. I think probably a next interesting place to go, kind of route us through into some of the more detail about the technology. Mac, I'll kind of come to you, and this is really more around a high level of, where does it fit in the PTP portfolio? So we're obviously a cloud first organization. We've got a really heavy network background, but yet we've got this partnership with Megaport. So maybe just explain how that fits in.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to understand. When it comes to PTP, every day we're out there helping clients consume cloud effectively, right? It starts with, a customer wanting to take advantage of the agility that the cloud can bring to a business. And in order to sort of start the process, you have to look at the applications closely and figure out, can the application reside on cloud infrastructure effectively? So we're out there every day assessing applications, sometimes talking about refactoring those applications if they aren't ideally, fit for the cloud. We're also talking to customers about migration plans once we figure out whether or not the app can go there. We obviously will talk to them about day 2 support and making sure they're optimizing their costs, controls, their security. So there's a lot that we do, but there's really nothing that I think is more important than the user experience, and that relies heavily on the network connectivity that gets put in place, the architecture. So when we started our partnership with Megaport, that was critical for us to have this type of partner that can, from an overarching perspective, give the user the experience that they need, right? Because if a business wants to take advantage of the agility of the cloud, if they have applications that are tied to business outcomes, but the users just can't do their jobs effectively because there's too much latency or jitter or delay, or it's just not getting done effectively because of the network, that's a huge problem. So Megaport is one of our most critical partners because of the way they do things from a cloud connectivity standpoint. And, I view it with every client we have, we should be talking to them about, direct connect to AWS. How are you doing it? Express route with Azure. How are you doing it? Oh, you have a relationship with Salesforce. How do you get there? Those are all things that PTP needs to be talking to our customers about. So we get excited about our Megaport partnership because of the things that you guys on the call will learn today.
Yeah, and I just like to add a little bit to that, which is that, when a lot of times we'll have conversations with customers, I think, which was alluded to earlier, where their experience getting to the different hyperscalers may be limited to one particular vendor, if you will. So they might be in AWS already, they might be in Azure already, or GCP or whatever. And typically what we'll see is customers are connected, but they might be using a VPN appliance to connect because that's the easiest way for them to get started and things like that. But when they start, as Mike said, having these workloads that are getting moved there, that they're trying to still present in a way that gives the users a good experience, even though they're not physically and obviously in the same environment. Oftentimes they are challenged with application architecture stuff, which are other things that we do. But from a sheer flexibility and bandwidth perspective, they don't really necessarily know how to get from point A to point B. And that is, again, that's our job, but it's also one of the reasons why, to Mike's point, we value this Megaport partnership as much as we do, because they give the flexibility to be able to connect all of these hyperscalers in one pane of glass, which is pretty powerful for
huge.
customers.
If you go to a carrier, if you're
Row.
I lost Mike.
That was like, to the attendees. I'll get what that's because I had a feeling it was
not a Megaport connection. I swear to God.
So while we're waiting for Mac to get back, Mike, I was gonna come to you and just I think we've set up kind of the industry opportunity and a little bit of the whys around multiple clouds and why it fits in our portfolio. Can you just take us through a little bit from just a general architecture perspective, like what is the solution, how does it bolt in, and what's it actually doing? That would be probably a great starting point before we get into some more detail.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that relates back to some of the challenges, right, that come up in connecting to the cloud, where, what I like to say is sometimes you start to potentially get network sprawl. So if you've got multiple clouds that you're connecting to, and ultimately you're trying to build in redundancy, you're going to be ultimately building multiple private links from either your physical data centers or from your branch offices ultimately to a cloud edge. Well, knowing that the cloud workloads change and even adding additional cloud providers as they change, if you're just locked into, a static old type of carrier model, then typically, you're locked in and it's not very flexible to make those changes. So when you look at Megaport and the way that we've built out our network and then the way that we price our services, is we've already built out the network, and that our customers are going to connect to us in one of our enabled locations, which are typically third-party data centers or across roughly 100 different data center operators globally. We've built out a private networking platform that also incorporates the physical connectivity to the hyperscalers at their edge locations, to which we've built out more of those locations globally as well. So generally speaking, customers are going to want to get from their network to the cloud provider network on the shortest available path as possible, and then ultimately they're going to have the best fiber routes or network routes into the regions where resources actually sit. So, from a Megaport perspective, since we've already deployed that infrastructure, we've already taken care of all of the physical routes from a fiber perspective. We've also built the layer 2 components to connect those A and B ends together. We really take the complexity of managing, multiple network links that the customer typically would have to manage if they go multi-cloud or if they need to go, build in some type of diversity and redundancy. So our customers are going to connect to us directly to a Megaport owned router in one of our enabled data center locations. We're going to route them over our private layer 2 network platform to the B end, which is typically another physical connection where we're connected to the cloud provider edge. We're also then operating a software-defined network that integrates the connectivity to the cloud provider. So essentially, we're setting up the layer 2 service all the way from the data center where they connect to Megaport all the way into ultimately their cloud resources, to where the customer manages all of the routing directly with their private environment in the cloud, right? So they're advertising whatever routes that they want to advertise out of their network and into the cloud, and advertising out of the cloud any routes that they want to advertise out from the cloud. So all of the routing is managed by them. It's all going over private network infrastructure that's owned and operated by Megaport. We're not handing them off to a third party, and they're also, most importantly, from a security standpoint, not being routed in any way over the internet. It's all private lockdown layer 2 connectivity.
Great, great explanation. So, I consider myself to be the lowest common denominator in most of these conversations, but for me, it's direct connect, super highway, less hops, all the things that could cause latency or performance issues, things of that nature. And if we've got a lot of resources out in the cloud area, like, why not cost effectively find a way to access those resources faster and more securely? Fair layman's summary.
Gary, I'm back. Sorry, I had my computer locked up on me.
Not a problem. It happens. Glad you're back. I could tell that whatever you were going to say was going to be dynamite. So
yeah, it always is.
If you want to finish those thoughts, we're ready. We just had Mike take us through kind of high level architecture of the Megaport solution.
What I was going to say before I was so rudely interrupted by my Lenovo, the carriers out there, right? A lot of clients have relationships with carrier reps, and they're always in their ears trying to talk to them about new services that the carrier brings to bear. They'll come and try and sell you a connection to all these cloud providers, and the expense associated with these connections are pretty large, right? You got the last mile from their headquarters or whatever their data center is back to the carrier's point of presence. It's expensive, and it's single threaded. It does that connection usually does one thing. It doesn't, it's not a jackknife. It's simply a pipe to that cloud provider. And oh, by the way, it's marked up 30, 40, 50, 100% versus what you can do if you get creative with the architecture, leveraging Megaport's technology. So that's what I was gonna say. It would have been so spot on if I said it before.
It was worth the wait.
I got it in.
Absolutely worth the wait. Okay, so
Gary, can I tell you what really happened? I had to shut down. I did a quick shot.
Hey, it's happy hour. You're allowed to do that. We're a small company.
I was going to say put your beer on your computer, but I don't want to suggest that.
Never. That would be a crime.
I'll admit I had such good timing while Mike was going through the architecture. I was able to press mute as the Amazon guy came up and delivered packages, and my dogs went crazy. So it was so far so good.
It all works out, and we're only halfway through.
Yeah. So Mr. Dusio, so we work with a lot of organizations that are small but growing fast, especially a lot of our life sciences customers that kind of have that seed money. Once they get through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, they get a lot more money, and then they've got to grow fast as they try to bring treatments to market. So can you just talk to us a little bit about how Megaport can provide room to grow if a customer wants to start off with little bit lower speed connection because the demands aren't that high, but ultimately they're going to want to move up as their resources increase. What's that look like?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I kind of mentioned a little bit before, but it is not abnormal for this to happen where customers, they're not only moving workloads into these hyperscalers, but they're, moving they're from a lot of business reasons, they're moving literally entire blocks of what used to be legacy infrastructure up into the cloud. And again, there's limitations. I don't know how familiar most of the folks that are on this call from a participant perspective are, but there are limitations in how fast you can connect to the cloud over a VPN, meaning like a native VPN into those hyperscalers. But one of the other challenges that folks don't realize necessarily is that by default, just using AWS as an example, if you want to get a direct connect in AWS, you're already starting at a gig of bandwidth and then moving up from there. Otherwise, you have to use a third-party partner, which then you can buy a sub-rate connection and then ratchet it up, but it's still referred to as a direct connect, where you're using a direct connect partner to get that connectivity. And again, that is a single-threaded connection that specifically pertains to AWS. So the biggest bang for the buck that I could possibly give you about this as it relates to Megaport is that not only can you get a smaller amount of bandwidth and scale it up as you need to, you can also do it on an almost like a real-time basis. So you can go from sub-rate gig up to 10 gig if you need to. You might be getting a different optic if you had to do something like that. But just the point that I'd really like to emphasize is this. Customers typically can't really adjust their bandwidth on the fly. And anybody that's been in the business for a long time knows when you get a circuit and you have a committed information rate of X, to get that to be adjusted to double, to triple, like from 100 to 200, 300 megabits per second, for example, or even ratchet it back down, it's really impossible, especially going in the reverse order. One of the cool things that Megaport allows you to do, basically increase or decrease the amount of bandwidth that you want to use based on the workload. So if you have a good concept of your requirements, you could literally go in there and either automatically or just manually go in and ratchet up or down how much bandwidth you're allowing that circuit to use. And that could be during a time of day where the workloads are higher or lower. So therefore your costs are minimized and optimized as a result of doing so. So it's a huge benefit for customers, not only from the fact that they can now scale up from sub-rate 1 gig to much higher bandwidth with the same provider, but they can also be very, very cost conscious and effective in being able to control those costs by using the tools that are available to them through Megaport.
That's what the cloud's all about.
Yeah, so that's critical, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we realize as a business that's supporting customers in utility-based billing is that without the right oversight, the cost overruns can get crazy. And so, part of what we're doing at PTP is, hey, we're the best friend to, the CIO and the security guys, trying to provide oversight, but also to the CFO, the way we can put kind of parameters around that environment and give information back to the business so that, hey, you got idle resources and you've got, overbuilt instances, things like that from a cloud perspective. But from what I'm hearing you say, it's working the same thing from a network perspective. So we can do the same thing. If we know we're going to have high utilization for a day or a week, we can crank it up and then we can crank it right back down. That's huge.
Yeah, it's almost like if you took the equivalent of if you had like a network load balancer up in the cloud and you have basically thresholds that you put on those, and as workloads increase, more instances get launched so you can handle the workloads, and as those requirements decrease, then those instances become shut off, right? It's the same concept, but we're abstracting that from the hyperscale environment and putting it into the network, which is new for most people and pretty exciting. So
that is exciting. See, these are the things I get to learn getting to moderate these. So that's cool. I like it. Chris, back to you, not Dusio, other Chris. So can we just talk maybe about, we talked earlier about accessing cloud resources, but there's, even within Megaport, there are some different options there, or there's some different solutions. Can you just talk about some of the different access methods for these cloud resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So broad strokes, kind of a few folks mentioned it earlier. Just when people are looking at cloud connectivity, kind of the two first kind of buckets would be public access, and that would be the public internet. But as Dusio mentioned, there are some pitfalls, right? Unpredictable performance, inherently less secure, and there are actually some economic factors too, because the egress charges, basically the majority of the cloud providers will bill you when you pull information out, are substantially higher when connecting over the public internet. So kind of usually when people are on their cloud journey and they either see those egress charges ballooning up or they realize that they see performance deterioration, that's when they start looking at private connections to the cloud or layer 2 connections. And that would be your direct connect to AWS, your express route to Azure, fast connect for Oracle, GCI for Google, the list goes on and on. So when we kind of go to private connectivity, there's a few different players. Obviously, traditional carriers are the incumbents. As Mike mentioned, obviously there's some pitfalls there because it's a static circuit connecting to elastic resources. So just really not the perfect mesh. You're usually dealing with longer terms, longer lead times, obviously lock in from a capacity standpoint. And when you're actually trying to build out a network like that on a global scale, it just doesn't work. So kind of brought to bear kind of some of the newer offerings as far as cloud exchanges and software-defined networks. And really kind of those, again, great services. And from a technical perspective, Megaport operates a software-defined network. But to the broader market, a lot of times those offerings are more of like an add-on service. So we have a data center and now we do cloud connectivity, or we had this like carrier-grade network offering and now we're just going to add on cloud. And while they do have some of the benefits of being able to spin things up on the fly or giving some type of portal control, the options and the reach are limited, right? Because it's not their main focus. So really Megaport, we coin ourselves as network as a service, and it's kind of differentiate because what we're doing is different, right? So we actually built a network specifically for cloud consumption. So it's really all about letting consumers connect to cloud and consume those resources how they want, when they want. So in the same way that they could spin up compute storage within the cloud itself, they can do the same thing with our network. And that's really all about kind of that future proofing. So they know we have a single pane of glass that now when we're actually adding more complexity with multiple vendors in multiple locations and building in resiliency, they can actually control all of that via the Megaport portal, right? With that one-to-many elastic capacity model. And then when it comes to Megaport, as Mike Rockwell mentioned, we kind of have a few different flavors as far as options. So one is obviously physical infrastructure of the cloud, which is the traditional Megaport option. We also have options now for direct cloud-to-cloud networking via our Megaport Cloud Router product. Again, just pushing routing as close to the edge as possible, just increase performance even more for multi-cloud workloads. And then we do also have more and more of our clients leveraging data center to data center over the Megaport network as well. So really just providing, again, kind of that solid foundation to make sure that all things network are covered. So when you're working with clients and kind of managing and figuring out the best dots, right, where they should actually have their workloads, Megaport's kind of that de facto, we can connect all those dots together.
Yeah, that's dynamite. So playing off that, Mac, since you're taking a lot of those concepts and technologies and engaging directly with PTP customers, can you maybe discuss or share a client architecture example of an architecture that might be interesting to some of our attendees this afternoon?
Love to. I think we've been spending a lot of time with life sciences, as mentioned. So I'll talk a little bit about a quick story of a company that went from 10 employees to 70 employees in a year, and then made a leap from 70 employees to 200 in the next year. So they outgrew the incubator space they were in Cambridge. They signed a lease about 4 months ago with a commercial real estate company. Believe it or not, they did it right before the pandemic. So maybe it was 6 months ago now, it was January. And at the time they said, listen, we're moving, we got 200 employees, we're getting 35,000 square feet of office space, 35,000 square feet of lab space. And, my IT folks, because this was a bioinformatician who I was talking to, He said, my IT folks are trying to ask me what I need from a connectivity to the cloud perspective. What do I do? And I said, oh man, this is great. Let me talk to the IT folks, because there's solutions that they probably have never heard of before that are really going to help the business overall from a productivity standpoint, you know, for all employees and also for those doing research. So, you know, what we did is we talked to them obviously about Megaport. We said, hey, you know, you're moving to a location in Waltham. You have a Megaport POP, point of presence, at a data center around the corner from you. It's probably a quarter of a mile away. Let's run a gigabit fiber connection from your location, you know, right to that data center, a layer 2 point to point. And we'll just run that connection to the meet me room in that data center. And from there, we'll do a cross connect to Megaport. And the customer said, well, what's that going to get me? And I saw that slide that you put up there at the beginning. I'd love to see that thing again. But what I told the customer is, what's it going to get you? How about leveraging a gigabit fiber connection that can scale to 10 gig in a second and be able to access directly all these different players, GCP, Azure, AWS, you know, 8x8 for your phone system because they were an 8x8 customer, Salesforce. Oh, by the way, you want an internet connection? Yeah, we can give you a hop off to Hurricane Networks, which is a new company to me. I didn't know them until Megaport came around for internet connectivity, internet. Basically, what I was telling this customer is, you're going to be able to use this last mile connection, layer 2, from your headquarters to the data center and cross connect virtually and get a port directly into all these different environments that are critical to your business. And if you didn't have this Megaport option, you'd have to figure out a way to architect a WAN and connectivity to all these different players. You'd probably have to start to think about VPNing and doing all this crazy stuff. And the customer got it. The bioinformatician didn't really get it, but the IT guys were like, yes, this is cool. Because guess what? They saved a ton of money, right? They paid a last mile connection on layer 2 from, you know, one spot in Waltham to a quarter mile away. It was probably $1,200 for a gigabit that could scale to 10 gig, right, in a snap. And then all the cross connects, you know, in the port to Megaport, those are small, you know, smaller fees. So, you know, that's what we're doing for small customers. For larger customers, we're trying to go in and educate them on the, you know, how incorrectly they're doing things now. They're typically going to, you know, open up a port in their MPLS network with their carrier, AT&T, Verizon, CenturyLink, and go that route. The cost to do that is exorbitant, and the ability to work with those carriers, you know, let's face it, there's a common saying that everybody knows about in the carrier world. It's a who sucks the least game, right? So if you can get similar type of services for a price point that's a heck of a lot less, right? And do it in a manner, do it with a group of people that care about your business and can support you. Boom, done. So I'll stop there.
So I'm sorry, I just want to just add one little thing to what Mike said, because I think it's super important. You know, taking the example that Mike alluded to with these different SaaS providers that are out there, to be able to connect to them using Megaport as the conduit to do that without having capabilities like that, for example, you'd have a much more challenging task, because you'd be accessing those environments in a much different way, which could affect your folks' performance, your clients' performance within the organization. So it's a tremendous benefit. And basically what Mike really, he said it all, but what he really gave the guy was, anything you pretty much want to do, even though you don't know what you need to do, you can do it. And I think that is
slide up, Gary. Sorry to interrupt you, Chris.
No, not at all. It's fine.
That first, when we started that slide, I mean, that slide right there, when I show that to an IT person and then explain all the steps to build this and what it costs, their jaws drop. You know, it's like, it's magic, in my opinion. Yeah. Some customers might be like, oh, I can do that with AT&T. Good luck. Your price, your monthly costs are going to explode, and your ability to do it in a seamless manner is going to be non-existent. So
I think one of the biggest testaments to like how we simplify network connectivity is we actually have clients who have people who aren't network engineers spinning up Megaport connections to AWS and Azure. And that's unheard of, right? So that's like my favorite thing in the world. When we can actually kind of strip out all the complexity, have documentation, walk them through that process.
Right.
It's just a game changer.
When salespeople can do the demos, I mean, it's game over. Anyone can buy it.
So we've talked a little bit about performance. We've talked a little bit about, the cost savings and efficiency there. Mike Rockwell, to you, I want to shift gears a little bit into just security. And, so how can data security be improved with this type of connectivity?
Yeah, so talked a little bit about some of that previously in describing the network, and that it's a private connection model, right? So it's not being routed over the internet. Specific to Megaport, when a customer connects to our network, it's routed over Megaport owned and operated switches end to end, ultimately where the traffic egresses to the cloud provider. So your traffic, when it passes across Megaport, it's never going to touch the internet. So you're not going to be having BGP hijacks, things like that. You're also not going to be routed to a third party. You're going to be going over a layer 2 pipe from point A ultimately to point B, where your data is going to go into either one of our service providers or more likely one of the hyperscalers. From a routing perspective, you're going to set up a BGP peering relationship from your network directly to your cloud network and route securely end to end. As far as setting up an encryption, on the private connectivity model with the cloud providers, they're not encrypting the traffic across the line on their network, and Megaport is not encrypting the traffic across our network either. So there are different verticals or customers that we're working with that do have the necessity to encrypt that traffic. So typically, they're working with either a provider that can provide an appliance within the cloud to encrypt that traffic end to end, or the other option that we'll typically see is when it comes specifically to working with the cloud provider and having a private connection, is whether it's through AWS and a public VIF or Microsoft through their Microsoft peering. You can set up a public peering relationship. So essentially using public IP addressing, you set up BGP, you receive all the public endpoints to where you can set up a VPN tunnel over that private connection. So it's still not routing over the internet. You're receiving those public endpoints. You can set up VPN tunnels and run, IPsec. So from an encryption standpoint, in actually, encrypting and protecting the data, typically it's going to be with a service provider and those appliances, or if it's just directly to a solution that you can provide via, the private connectivity model, like a direct connect or express route, it's public routing, VPN tunnels, and running IPsec.
Yeah, and when I listen to that, I think about, organizationally, just at a high level, I think, most of our customers are, they're looking for the greatest amount of, flexibility and scalability and ease of use and to be dynamic as the business depends, with also having financial controls and security controls. So trying to find that balance. And so, obviously the cloud and moving resources in the cloud provides that opportunity to be able to spin up and spin down resources and use different services on demand. But also with that represents some, options for open configurations and things like that. So when you think about access like this and being able to deliver a little bit more of like that true private cloud type controls, but with access to public cloud resources, I think that's where you see a lot of customers, I think, will want to entertain services like these and kind of find that common ground, if you will. That makes a lot of sense. Dusio. So I know, we chatted a little bit about this before, and this is probably going to be ultimately a question to the group. But so now with Megaport, if we're just thinking about like part of my job is running our managed services organization. So we're helping support our customers' technology. And so a lot of what we're doing is we're supporting their, manufacturer, hardware and software and WAN providers and resources like Megaport, et cetera. So there's a number of different players involved. So in this scenario, let's say a customer is using network services and Megaport and cloud resources. So, who do they, just from a support perspective, how do we communicate to them? Who do they call when there's an issue with cloud connectivity, hyperscaler, Megaport, where do the responsibilities begin and end? And can you help provide a little bit of clarity? Somebody just, maybe start with that and then others can jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically, in a nutshell, that Megaport is responsible for, their connectivity from the client's ingress point to the point where the cloud provider is kind of picking up that connectivity. And then, after that, you'd be talking to the cloud provider if there was an issue. Let's say, for example, where the Megaport cross connect goes into I'll use AWS as the example, into their route. If there's a problem over there, then you're going to have to get those folks involved. Now, as PTP, if we were managing a customer environment, then we would probably be responsible for all that, assuming that that's our role in the customer's environment. But pretty much that's kind of the gist of how, from an operational perspective, we handle it.
Yeah,
anybody else add anything to that? So
yeah, definitely. I guess just from a Megaport perspective here, what's great is, again, inherently network as a service, all about automation. We actually do have like proactive alerts that go out to all the users on the Megaport accounts, and they would actually be able to kind of log in and see all of their services if they're live, if something dropped from BGP session perspective, all that. And then we actually have multiple ways to contact our network support service team. 24/7. They're actually all Megaport employees, follow the sun model. So we do have like phone numbers, emails, but most of our users love to use, again, within that portal, we have a real-time chat feature as well. And they're incredibly responsive. So I often find that most of our clients always come to Megaport first, just to make sure everything from a layer 2 perspective looks good, or they can just validate that very quickly. And then we could always provide guidance, or if we have any updates from the endpoints, those service providers themselves, we can kind of point them in the right direction.
Yeah, that's huge for a company like ours when we're providing that overarching managed service. We have a team that all rolls up to Gary that's out there working on the customer's behalf to open a ticket with the last mile provider, right? Then opening a ticket with maybe an internet provider to figure out what's going on there. And then communicating with you effectively is going to be hugely important. Understanding what's going on with their cloud account, if we're the managing part or managing service there. Every single call or communication that's done by our NOC is important, right? Working with Megaport to date has been seamless. Working with, companies like Crown Castle, we're good at it, so the reality is the more streamlined you are, which you just explained, it's pretty streamlined. It's layer 2. We know what's going on at all times. The quicker we can get back to customers. It's tough for an IT group, right? When they have to go and call 4 or 5 different players to figure out what's going on. But when you're streamlined and new, you guys aren't exactly new, meaning a year old, but you're 10 years old. You've built systems from the ground up that work. So we know we can get good answers quickly, which means quicker, results and better ways to triage problems. It's important for network connectivity.
Not only that, but I don't know again how far in the weeds you want to get with this, but Megaport has extreme resiliency built into their network as it is, and right. What would typically be the case would be that you might not even realize that there's a problem, hopefully, right? And if there is, you're getting proactive alerts about it. But the point is that we've also run into customers that put in solutions that are, what Mike mentioned earlier, like single-threaded. Megaport's kind of basically built a model of what I would call, a service provider model, right? They have extreme resiliency in their network, multiple connections into these hyperscalers, such that if there was an outage, for example, the recovery time around that should be A, nominal in most situations, and B, most of the customers might not even recognize that there's an issue. So not to say that they never could be an issue, but it's nice to know that from an architecture perspective that things are set up in a manner that really helps customers not shoot themselves in the foot when they're setting things up, because sometimes customers will go think and set things up on their own with a particular hyperscaler, and they'll do things that might actually undermine their ability to recover failure situations. So just thought I'd mention that.
That's great. Maybe back to Chris, it just kind of so we've got it all implemented. I know you mentioned, you've got some people that you've worked with that, don't have a whole lot of technical experience working with it, but maybe just basics around operations and administration, how much, day-to-day activity is the solution involve, how much management and overhead should an organization be thinking about when they make this part of their cloud access solution?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the best things is Mike and the team he manages has a great deal of documentation that they put out. So we actually have basically like a wiki style guide to walk anyone through kind of all the step-by-step implementation for any and all of the Megaport services. And from an upfront onboarding perspective, we really do give a white glove approach, and that's just part of the service offering. So we make sure that they set up their account the way they would like it, adding the right users, making sure that they get the best designs possible. And really, once it's actually implemented, which again, it's all relatively real time, they could more or less set it and forget it. What we see more commonly though is because we offer that great deal of flexibility to be able to scale things up on the fly, right size your capacity, we do have a lot of clients who are actively involved. So either they're doing that via the portal itself, which is accessible via the web, or we even have mobile applications for it. And literally, if they need to make a change, it's no longer kind of getting a change order, having to submit tickets, waiting and coordinating that for months, days, whatever it may be. As soon as they have that change window, they can literally go into the portal and in a few clicks actually make that change, and then again just leave it set and just wait till the next change is required. And we even have an open RESTful API. So some of our power users, I like to coin them as, when they're really doing things with the elasticity and auto scaling of resources within the cloud, they'll actually take the time to write to our API and automate things even further. So it really is kind of as hands-on, hands-off as you want it to be, and you just have all the tools at your disposal, really streamlined, really simple, and obviously Megaport and PTP are always there to help.
Chris, question for you.
Yes.
When you negotiate terms with customers, and I'm actually being a little bit facetious here.
Yeah.
How does that work? Because I know with carriers, it can take weeks and months and ridiculousness to get things done. How do you guys operate there?
It's a great question, and thanks for the lead in. So basically, the only service on our entire platform that carries any type of term are the Megaports, right? Those physical interfaces that you need to connect physical infrastructure to the cloud. And by default, those are month to month. All the connections themselves, we call them virtual cross connects, right? They have no term. Those cloud routers I mentioned, also no term. So incredibly flexible, no need to go back and forth and really haggle over things. It's kind of what you see is what you'll pay. All that pricing displays in the portal. And then even easier from an implementation standpoint, you can actually agree to the terms and conditions, which are very favorable. We even offer 100% uptime SLA right within the portal. So it's all click through. So it really just simplifies the whole process.
Yeah, remember the battle of who sucks the least? You guys win because you don't suck at all. I mean, at the end of the day, there's no term. The pricing is right there on the website. It's just a product and service that facilitates user experience, positive user experience. So good stuff.
It's fantastic. What a crazy concept. Be easy to do business with. That's so strange.
Right. Kind of like our Peak Plus product, right? You want to customize your SLA, we'll do that for you. Oh, you want to try us out? We'll do that for you,
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you want to get locked in, you may have something to hide. That's kind of my thought process. So we got to we're right at the top of the hour according to my clock. Got in, I think, just about all the questions I had written down, but we can take a few more minutes. Any either parting comments or things that anybody wanted to bring up that we didn't necessarily have a question for before we close out? Anything that you think might be interesting or relevant to the attendees that we've got on the line? To whoever.
Well, I mean, I guess I would just like to basically say that If you looked at, the traditional way that I've literally seen customers implementing connectivity to even just 2 of the hyperscalers out there, and doing it natively, and then trying to wrap their head around how to accomplish that, how to create redundancy and resiliency, where to put their workloads if they change their mind or they get stuck into these longer term contracts, all of these things that not only that, but you'll sometimes find different teams within an organization that have expertise in one hyperscaler versus another, which then drives connectivity into one place versus another. This is just kind of one of those solutions. Like if you would try to architect something like that, just imagine having 3 of these cloud providers and having to have connectivity to all 3 of them natively through their own specific circuits and things like that. It would be cost prohibitive, inflexible, extremely expensive, hard to maintain and troubleshoot to what you've negotiated for those things. And if you change your mind for whatever reason, like let's just say, for example, one of them or another hyperscaler comes up that has a price point for your workloads that is so much better than the other ones or one of the other ones that you have, and you really don't have the flexibility to change that, you put yourself in a real tight spot. And so having a product like this that allows you to establish the connectivity to wherever and change your pathways to go from point A to point B or A to C or whatever, it's extremely valuable in my opinion, and it makes things a lot less complex than they would be otherwise. So I just think that is the crux of what I think the biggest benefit to this product is.
Heck yeah, for sure.
I guess the one thing I would add, kind of just to piggyback off that, is any like enterprise who is actually at any point during their cloud journey, definitely reach out to PTP and Megaport as early as possible so you can avoid some of those pitfalls. I think a lot of times people focus on building out the application and they'll get to the network later, and that's usually kind of what holds up progress. So this is what we do. Yeah, this is what we do all day, every day, and it's a great partnership, and we can really take care of you end to end. So anything you need, any questions, just feel free to reach out to us. More than happy to help.
I had to apologize to a VP of IT of a publicly traded therapeutics company who's moving in January. They're planning to move in, and they had already ordered all their circuits and all their direct connects and express routes and gigabit to the internet and their MPLS and all this other nonsense. And I said, oh man, we could have done all this for you in such a more streamlined and cost-effective fashion. And they're like, I already signed the contracts. I'm like, well, you're done. I'm sorry. And I was apologetic because it would have meant hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings, and no matter, I mean, forget about how easy it would have been to deploy it and use it. So anyway, good point, Chris.
Yeah, it's like getting to the customer at the right time. It's true because sometimes I got to bite my tongue if I got a customer that's doing something like that, and they're already in the throes of having it already installed or whatever. It's hard to get out of it. Right? It's like just trying to get their attention and talking to the right people at the right time to just have them understand the value add is super important. So.
Yeah, and even understanding once you get past that into the networking within the cloud, those are certain things around SLAs and how they can set it up, and some of the costs are involved in that. I mean, there's certainly pitfalls even just beyond the stuff that we've talked about. But once you kind of get to that first layer of the cloud before you ultimately get to your locations. So, as Chris said, I think between the teams that are on this call, I think we definitely have the expertise to come up with the great solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So to those that are on, just obviously want to thank you for your participation. We've got this group obviously can be available for further discussion. So, reach out to us at PTP. You can hit us up at, info@ptp.cloud. If you have, obviously, if you've got an account manager, reach out to them. Get us at marketing@ptp.cloud. We'll get to the right spot and obviously engage our Megaport partners, and we'll obviously love to have further conversation. We do have some people that'll follow up after the event. Just make sure that you've got access to slide material and recording of the event and things like that, should you want to kind of go back and look at any of the information. So we'll have that come in here in the next few days. But to the panelists, thank you guys for taking the time this afternoon. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
I certainly learned a lot. And to the attendees, thanks for taking an hour out of your time and joining PTP and Megaport. So hope everyone has a great rest of the week, great weekend, and we'll see you later. Thank you, everyone.
Guys, thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
Appreciate
care.
your time. Bye now.